Hey everyone, in this video, I'm going to walk you through building a simple end-to-end feature using your starter kit for full-stack ChatGPT web app. We're going to extend our simple ChatGPT interface into two parallel chat interfaces, one that calls ChatGPT and another that calls its predecessor, GPT-3. When we're done, we'll be able to call prompts to either model and compare the results side by side. So I have the app running locally right now, and it has a simple interface for typing in a prompt, hitting send, and then seeing what ChatGPT says. Let's extend this feature by first starting with a database schema, which you can find under Packages, DB, and then Prisma. So I'm going to open up my Prisma schema here. I'm going to copy paste this chat model and rename it to GPT-3. We're doing this because we want to store all the records that we call from GPT-3 into a separate table. I'm going to hit save and Control C and actually push this updated schema to a database by calling pvm-db:/push. Awesome. I have that working now. So the next step is going to be to create a new API endpoint so we can create, read, and delete records from calling GPT-3 using our frontend app. This should be fairly simple because we're using tRPC for API routing. So in the packages/API /serve/router, we actually have auth and chat set up as our current API routes. I'm just going to create a new file called gp3.ts, and I'm going to copy all this chat.ts code into our new file. We're now going to work with our chat API endpoint and modify it a little bit. Let's actually start by changing what the model is. So we have our OpenAI chat function that's being called from LangChain, which is the library that we're using for LLM management. To use GPT-3 instead of ChatGPT, I'm just going to replace this OpenAI chat with OpenAI, which is the function that can be used for instantiating one of the older models. And as the argument, I'm going to pass in a temperature of Fahrenheit. I can get rid of all of this code, which was only relevant for ChatGPT. We're basically just passing in the previous chat as prefix messages or context, so we can actually have a follow-up conversation. But older models of OpenAI don't really support that, so we don't really need any of this. Great. So we have a model, and we're calling this model with whatever the user typed into the input text box as the prompt. So when you press send, it's just going to send whatever you typed in as the prompt and fetch those results. And instead of storing that in our chat table, we want to store that in our new GPT-3 table. So what I'm going to do is just rename this word chat with GPT-3. And that should set me up. One good thing that happened is it also renamed this router function to GPT-3 router. So now I can actually go into the root file where all of these routers are configured, and I can add in a new endpoint, say GPT-3, and pass that off to GPT-3 router. Okay, now the last step is to call this route from the front end. Let's pop over to our Next.js app, which you can find under app/Next.js. And I'm going to open up our homepage, which is located under source/pages/index.tsx. Let's take a look at the home function component. So we have our chat query from our API, chat API endpoint being called right here. And we're checking if there's data, and we're just mapping through that. And for each query data, we're just rendering a simple chart. I'm going to nest this up into its own div. Going to give it some simple flex styling, and I'm just going to put this up in right here. And let's start by copy pasting this and replacing chat query with a new query that we will call GPT-3 query. Let's actually make this query now. So I'm going to copy paste chat query and replace it and call GPT-3 query. And the endpoint we're calling is a new GPT-3 endpoint. Great. We also want to change this flex goal to flex row. So now we have these two things being shown as columns side by side. I'm going to put up this clear chat button into our first column. The next thing I'm going to do is actually change this chat cut. So it's more like GPT-3 cut. So we have separate cuts for our GPT-3 calls. Let's just go ahead and copy paste this chat cut function, call it GPT-3 cut. This is GPT-3 with GPT-3 as well. Awesome. Now let's try running and see what we have so far. Sweet. Okay, so we have a first column for ChatGPT. Let's actually put some labels so we can see which column is which. Just going to put up a simple span, call this ChatGPT, and let's give it some simple styling. Awesome. And let's do the same for GPT-3. Great. So we don't have any data in the second column right now because we don't actually have any records or a way to actually create a new record in the table. So let's go ahead and add a new button, something like call GPT-3 that actually lets us call our new endpoint with the create function. I'm going to go over to this submit prompt function, which is basically all of this stuff right here. And I'm going to add a new button. And let's call that call GPT-3. Let's change this to call ChatGPT. And for the onClick, we're going to have two separate functions. So let's change the name for this one to mutate ChatGPT and rename it right here. Let's also rename the errors while we're at it. And I'm going to rename this function to mutate GPT-3. And call this one mutate GPT-3 and error GPT. Now, when this onClick is called, we just want to do the same thing as we're doing with chat, but we will replace this chat endpoint with GPT-3. So I'm just going to do some like renaming. Awesome. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks decent. Another thing we'll do is just give some fixed width to these columns so we don't have one of them taking more width than the other one. That looks good. And now let's test things out. So I'll go ahead and clear this chat and type in a prompt and press call ChatGPT. Awesome. Now let's copy paste the same prompt and press our call GPT-3 button. Sweet. So you can see they have different results because they're calling two very different models. And this one seems a bit more conversational. Let's try asking a follow-up. Let's see what GPT-3 says for the same prompt. Okay, so you can see that those results are very different. And that's because I've built the chat route to pass in context from previous chats. So it's actually passing all of this data as the prompt before asking this simple question. And that way it's able to handle follow-ups pretty nicely, exactly like ChatGPT. The GPT-3 API, on the other hand, does not really include a way to pass in an existing conversation. So it can't really make sense of this follow-up question. All it has as context is this little snippet. And that's pretty much it for this feature. Hopefully this video gives you a good starting point for how to navigate the starter kit and build out your own AI features. Good luck.